At 34 years old, Sarah's default state is fine. She has a career she worked hard for, a relationship that functions properly, and a daily routine that looks objectively well constructed from every angle. But underneath that functioning exterior sits a persistent, quiet exhaustion, an ache with no name. 2:47 a.m., and she is 23 posts deep into a timeline of other people's highlight reels. She isn't jealous or angry. She is just drained, losing a late-night fight against an algorithm that has absolutely no idea she exists. This cycle of ambient distraction consumes the space where an actual life happens. When we feel this emptiness, our default response is to try and fix ourselves. We buy books on habit formation, sketch an aggressive morning routine, and demand a surge of discipline. We approach self-improvement through mechanical physics. We treat our minds like malfunctioning engines, assuming that if we just apply enough force, pressure, and raw willpower, we will eventually manufacture a better output. However, human formation actually operates on agricultural physics. You cannot force a seed to germinate by pressing harder on the dirt. Growth requires time and a look at what's happening beneath the surface. Trying to solve an internal ache with mechanical force is like trying to bolt a brand new behavior directly onto an unstable foundation. Self-improvement systems fail us under pressure because a surface-level patch cannot stabilize ground that is already shifting. To find stability, we have to look at the psychology of our automated failures. We have to ask why we inevitably snap at our partners, procrastinate on our most important work, or build massive, exhausting walls of perfectionism. These destructive patterns often mask a form of protective armor built over years to hide our deepest insecurities. Beneath almost every bad habit, there is a quiet lie running on a loop: the fear that we are not enough on our own, and the terror that we won't be loved if anyone sees our mess. This illustration demonstrates what happens when we fight those deep insecurities with raw willpower. We trigger the quicksand principle. In actual quicksand, frantic movement increases the vacuum pressure around you. The harder you fight the internal pressure, the faster you sink. The counterintuitive survival mechanism here is to stop fighting. You yield, spread your weight, and float. The sheer adrenaline of aggressively trying to fix yourself is the exact mechanism feeding the trap. Back in that dark room at 2:51 a.m., Sarah decides to step out of the quicksand. This diagram shows the architecture of a choice. We have a deep-worn, automated script. But right here, between its external trigger and our reaction, there is a half-second window, a gap. Psychiatrist Viktor Frankl survived conditions that stripped away every external human freedom, and he observed a defining truth. Our ultimate power and agency live exclusively inside that tiny space between a stimulus and our response. Sarah doesn't declare a massive life overhaul. She simply uses that gap to execute one micro-override. She places her phone face down on the counter and walks away. Reclaiming your mind from a scrolling algorithm depends on learning to find and widen that 3-second gap. 3 weeks later, the honeymoon phase ends. The old gravity reasserts itself. Sarah snaps at her partner over nothing and loses 40 minutes to scrolling on a random Wednesday afternoon. When that initial clarity fades, a highly convincing lie moves in: the belief that the system is completely broken and you are simply incapable of real change. This diagram separates agency from outcomes using a pen and a cup. The pen represents your rucksack, your pauses, honesty, and choices. You carry it. The cup is everything you cannot control: other people's moods, outside chaos, and the timeline of your visible progress. Trying to manage the cup turns you into an exhausted thermometer, constantly spiking and dropping based on the room's temperature. True agency requires acting like a thermostat, gently setting your own temperature and holding it steady. The ache with no name inevitably returns whenever we try to carry what doesn't belong to us. In the long middle phase of life, the daily work of finding the gap doesn't stop, but the crushing burden of having to constantly prove yourself finally does. You transition away from forcefully performing a new habit and begin quietly becoming a new person from the root up. True freedom arrives by dropping the heavy armor of productivity hacks and stepping completely out of the quicksand. Transformation offers an invitation to find rest in the gap. moving beyond the hustle of mechanical performance.